news on HLN. We'll continue our conversation, and this is one that's most difficult. We're talking about the death of 8-year-old Robert Manwill. Look at that cute little guy. Well, the indictment against his own mom and her live-in boyfriend is that he was tortured and beaten to death. Beaten with hands, feet, whatever Daniel Ehrlich Jr. could do to inflict pain on little Robert. That's what he did. That's the accusation here in the indictment. Let's take a phone call. Mary Ann's with us in Illinois. Mary Ann, your thoughts here?
Personally, I'm getting so tired of people abusing children, beating children, murdering children, and all of a sudden they get a mental problem. They should be executed immediately, given the same rights and privileges as their child.
Yeah, this one is most difficult. They all are, and this one's fresh because we see that cute little face, an 8-year-old boy, and you just stop and think of the size and demeanor of an 8-year-old and how he could go through this. Gosh, it's unthinkable. Greg Hahn's with us, local news editor, Idaho Statesman. They've been covering this one since the get-go. Greg, why? Do we have any kind of motive at all why someone would do this to an innocent little guy like that?
No, we haven't even, I mean, the closest we could get, folks didn't seem to be very close with either of these folks. She drifted in and out with her family, you know, sometimes she was estranged from her mom, from her sister. We had a really hard time finding people outside of Ehrlich's real immediate family to find folks. So there's not a lot of people who could really talk about, you know, their psychology and where they were coming from. It just didn't seem like we could find, anyway, close friends who kind of sat down and, you know, and really knew them very well.
Yeah.
Mike, I wanted to respond to something Mary Ann said earlier.
Yeah,
obviously, we have to, in this case, we always have to presume, if we can, to believe that somebody's innocent. And then let me just say this. If they did this horrific, unimaginable crime, there are, in Idaho, only two possibilities, life or death. And in this case, I would be shocked if they don't seek death. They have the same thing here in Florida, heinous, atrocious, and cruel. If they really tortured this child the way that they're alleging, I expect them to seek the death penalty.
And that's part of the indictment, says that Ehrlich Jr. intentionally tortured Manwill with the intent to cause suffering, to execute vengeance, satisfy some sadistic inclination by inflicting on Robert Manwill extreme or prolonged acts of brutality.
And with their history, Mike, you know, with their poster children for the death penalty, assuming they really did this.
Hey, Don, as an investigator, as you see this unfold, do you think Mom is the one telling the story now?
Well, I suspect that Mom is telling her story, but what the law enforcement has got to do in this case, Mike, is that they have got to do detailed interrogations of all the people who had any contact with this, so they can not let this just be an insane type of a case.
Yeah.
They've got to get that evidence and really nail it down solidly so those laws can be imposed.
Hey, Mark, do you think Mom's defense is going to be she was afraid of the guy?
That very well might be, pointing the finger over at him, and also, hey, I didn't do anything, it was him, and where are the eyewitnesses? The one who, the key eyewitness now, they've allegedly killed. So they'll point the finger back at each other and say, look, I didn't do it, he did it, and they might go back and forth.
Real quick, Greg, I got to ask you this one. Melissa Jenkins has a 2.5-year-old daughter. She's a little older now. We knew that she did not allow the little daughter to be alone with Daniel Ehrlich Jr. Did we ever find out why?
We did. We talked to the father, and he said he didn't really have a specific reason. He was the one. He had full custody. He could decide. The courts did whatever he wanted. He said he didn't like him. There was something about Ehrlich he didn't like. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he didn't want him to be alone with the little girl. And,
could it be his numerous? Could it be his numerous felony convictions? Could it be his violations of probation?
7 years in jail.
Could it be the fact that he's been to prison? Come on.
Yeah, if he didn't like it, why didn't he take some action about it? He was the one who had custody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as things look, good move on his part. Guys, we got to run. It's a tough case, but thanks so much. Coming up, another difficult one. Little autistic.